SGA's MVP case will swing with this stretch starting against New Orleans. We'll talk about that on today's Locked On Thunder podcast.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, media member, and Inside the Thunder beat writer, Rylan Stiles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, we're diving into SGA's MVP case. This stretch is going to define the MVP race, plus your mailbag questions. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Tonight's game against New Orleans is a big deal. It is a big game in a multitude of ways. First and foremost, it's going to go a long way in swinging SGA's MVP case. So after a blowout loss and arguably his worst game of the year, it's either this game or the home opener against Denver, SGA has a chance to go out there against a surging Pelicans team, against a matchup in Herb Jones, who's typically given him trouble, and against a Pelicans team who can duplicate the formula which has given the Thunder fits this year. The style of play that the Thunder have not fared overly good against has been these lengthy, physical teams who can gap really well and get back out onto the Thunder shooters and make SGA play in a crowd. You go into New Orleans and have a massive Shai game, and it goes a long way in deciding the MVP in this sense. I think that whoever has the top seed is going to get the MVP award in the Western Conference. I think if you had to decide it right now, the odds have flipped and the narrative nationally has flipped in favor of Jokic. And Jokic is an incredible player. He is the best player in the world right now. But we've never truly handed away the MVP award to the best player in the world. So while that is all true, that does not eliminate SGA from consideration. However, I think that Jokic is having a special season to where if he does finish ahead of Shai, it is not by any means ludicrous to vote for Jokic as the league MVP. But if Shai finishes above Jokic, you have to give him the nod. Here's why this game in particular will swing things for SGA and for OKC. For the Thunder to get the 1 seed, and in which case, give Shai the MVP. You're going to have to beat New Orleans, who can follow a similar formula to the Lakers, to the Bucks, to these teams that have given you fits. You're also going to have to perform against Milwaukee again, play Phoenix, New York, Philadelphia, Boston, Indiana, Sacramento, Dallas. Like, those are games that as the season winds down, as each game grows in accepted stakes, right? Because at the end of the day, a game in November can help you make up that one game back the same way that a game now can. However, we all kind of agree that these games mean more because there's now fewer of them. You have fewer time to make up for it, and it just feels bigger. So in these games where it feels greater and of more importance, you're going to be taking on teams that are in the national eye. That game against Boston was flexed to ESPN, which if the Thunder win, which they're going to need to get some of these hard games to become the 1 seed, that'll give you a series sweep over Boston. If you can do all those things, then SGA is absolutely the MVP. I know that people want to look at this last stretch of games where the last 4 games, his averages are down, and people want to be overly concerned about it. And it feels like this season is coming into a rapid close. But think about how much the narrative shifts if you go out tonight and have a big road win in New Orleans, put up 30-something points, come back tomorrow against the surging Rockets who have played fantastic basketball, second night of a back-to-back, and beat Houston. And along the way from now till claiming the 1 seed, which is something that few thought was possible, and I'd venture to say no one thought was truly possible. You can go and type in the comments about how you just somehow knew that this Thunder team this year would be the 1 seed in the West. I really find that hard to believe. I think even the most optimistic views of the Thunder was that, hey, this team is good enough to go on a run where they take the regular season more seriously than other teams, and they get a top 4 seed in the West, which was what our best case scenario was in our best, worst, and most likely case scenario preview show, was like, be a 4 seed where you get home court advantage. You had a great regular season, sort of mirroring what the Kings did last year, but being through and through, wire to wire, one of the best teams in the NBA all year was not on anyone's bingo card for this Thunder team this year. So that narrative, kind of plays into it as well. And again, we're talking about if they get the 1 seed, and to do that, they have to beat all these talented teams, all these superstars. They only have 2 gimme games left, Charlotte and San Antonio. Other than that, you are playing teams that are going to have a keen eye on them. Houston is trying to make a surge and overtake the Warriors, which is a massive NBA storyline. Boston, Philadelphia is a team that everyone is watching. And then it's Milwaukee, New Orleans, Phoenix, Indiana, Sacramento, and Dallas. And that game against Dallas, could define a lot for the standings. You also have the tiebreakers right now over both Denver and Minnesota. And that plays into this MVP case too. Shai's won against Denver head-to-head 3 out of 4 times. And then against Minnesota, you've split, and then it goes to division record. Right now, the Thunder have a better division record. And so it'll go a long way if Denver beats out Minnesota in these couple of games that they have left, and holding on to that tiebreaker. But I don't think that anything's decided yet. It is interesting that the odds have flipped toward Jokic, and Vegas is hardly ever wrong. But I think part of the odds changing is the fact of how difficult this stretch will be. And so if you're waiting for this MVP moment, and you're waiting for, SG to go take the MVP award, it can still happen with the matchups that lie ahead. And it starts against New Orleans. And for this Thunder team at large, this game against New Orleans is a big game. Because it's a unique game. It's a game in which you played Sunday against a matchup that's given you trouble all year long, against a team that blew you out one of the only handful of times that you've lost by a wide margin. And your next game on the docket is a team that plays that same style of basketball, who's going to have Zion and Jonas down low, who's going to have a great defender to put on Shai and Herb, who's given Shai issues. So you can immediately course correct and issue any adjustments and just see how those adjustments work in practice. Because oftentimes in the regular season, you might play a team like Milwaukee, followed by 4 games against Detroit, San Antonio, Houston, and Portland. And then you're not getting another go at that style of play. This is a unique scenario where you're immediately met with a great value version or a lesser version of Milwaukee. Of course, Milwaukee's better than New Orleans, but New Orleans has the bones of those kind of teams. They have a guy like Zion who is going to just physically, be overwhelming for Oklahoma City. And I'm interested to see how they react to that. Now, part of the quote-unquote adjustments is going to be shots just falling for Oklahoma City, because they could not hit water out of a boat on Sunday. But how do you manage a game where you're playing this physical of a team, and this team with such size? That'll be a question that we'll see answered here in a little bit, and we'll of course recap it all on today's Locked On Thunder podcast once that game is over tonight. So I cannot wait for that game, but I do think that Shai still has a chance for MVP. I think that whoever finishes one in the West is going to get MVP. And I think that the reason that it feels stacked against Shai right now is because it's going to be incredibly difficult for us. Great as the Thunder have been this year, it'll still be incredibly difficult, even only being a game back with the tiebreaker, to get that 1 seed, because you've got to navigate through these treacherous waters of this difficult schedule. So we'll see how it all lines out. But that's where I think that Shai's MVP case stands right now. Coming up, let's answer your mailbag questions. But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is great. PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNBA has what you need, and that is a daily fantasy platform, which is the best, and I think makes games a lot more interesting, because what you do is you pick 2 to 6 players, and you just project. Will they have more or less than their prize pick projections? So you're not playing against other players or fantasy sharks who just study all the trends and know more than you. It's just you versus the projected numbers. And my favorite part is you can cross sport entries. Those are a lot of fun. If you're watching March Madness this weekend, you can have a prize pick entry on the same ticket of NBA players and college basketball players. Or if you're a baseball fan and you're watching opening day Thursday and some NBA action, you can do that as well. Heck, you can do NBA action and March Madness and the NBA. It's a lot of fun at Prize Picks. It's Demon and Goblin Summit Prize Picks. You can win 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Whenever you bet $10, you can turn into 1,000 with Demon and Goblins. It's the newest and most exciting way to play Prize Picks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins give you different payouts. You can win up to 100 times your money and get as little as 4 correct to do so with Demon and Goblins. Plus, you're watching the games, and maybe, the issue for you is, yeah, but I only want to play this with the NBA, and the NBA is a little bit scary because sometimes these guys just sit out of nowhere. So if I set my entry in the morning and then come to find out at tip-off time this guy's not playing, what happens? Prize Picks even offers injury insurance. First of its kind, injury insurance, to where you never have to wonder what will be your ticket if these guys don't play. They have you covered there. So go there right now. It's the simplest way to play. It's the best way to play daily fantasy sports. It's a lot of fun. Check it out today at prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for the first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Let's get into your mailbag questions. We're going to have a mailbag today, Pelicans recap tomorrow, Rockets recap the next day, and then a special guest on Friday to round out the week. But this question, and Saturday will be the New York recap, so that'll be a lot of fun too. So this question, to start off the mailbag, comes from Thunder Topics. With the playoffs rapidly approaching, what's your favorite, least remembered OKC playoff moment? For example, Game 2 versus the Spurs in 2016 is one of my favorites, getting blown out by 40-plus to a 67-win team in Game 1. Everyone cut us out, and the series, and the Thunder were able to got out a road win. Yeah, I think that it's tough because, naturally, you're going to remember a lot of the playoff games. So, less remembered is a good way to say it. It's not anyone's favorite per se because of how the overall series ended. But that Jazz Game 5, 25-point comeback, that was really special. Just, I was at that game. It was the first time in my life I remember hearing, and again, I didn't have season tickets or anything from Lawton, but it was the first time I've ever been at a game where the Thunder were booed, and it never really came across the television as they were ever really booed at home. But there was audible boos to that Thunder team heading into halftime as the Jazz were just on their way to embarrassing Oklahoma City. And then they came back from down 25 points, and everyone, of course, it was electric at the end of the game in the Paycom Center. But that was a game where it didn't end up mattering. It didn't end up as some sort of hallmark game because you lost the series still. But I did really enjoy that game in the moment. I thought it was a lot of fun. But obviously, it's not going to be a huge remembrance because of the series total. Poku fan account. Maybe you need to get a new. Well, still support Poku in Charlotte. I won't say that. What are your thoughts on the Thunder potentially not being able to retain all three of Shai, Chet, and J-Dub due to Chet and J-Dub's, so far looking like they're going to need a big contract in the new CBA? First of all, I would just say, relax in the sense of you got to cross that bridge when you get there. I would also say that there's no law against this in the CBA that you can't just retain all three guys. I think that ownership is willing to do their part when it comes to retaining these guys. Of course, some of it falls on the players themselves. Like it wasn't as though ownership wasn't willing to retain Kevin Durant. Like he just made a decision that he thought was best for his career. So it's oftentimes tough to predict because we don't really know these guys and what they're thinking, what they want to do, or what's best for their careers in their minds, or what's best in their careers in actuality. So I think that, in terms of pay structure, in terms of like the actual rules, the Thunder are well positioned to retain all three guys. The Thunder are as well positioned to sign all three guys as you possibly can be. Organizationally, there is nothing else the Thunder can do than have an eager ownership group, then have a team that is really good to of course, sway things. No one's going to want to stay for a bad program. And then to have the ability to sell everyone top down on the fact that, these three guys would make up the vast majority of our salary cap. But because of these trades and because of these things that they've done with accumulating all these picks, they're able to still field a competitive team with cost-controlled talent through the draft. You look at Cason Wallace. Like Cason Wallace, as much as I really, really like Cason Wallace, he's not projected, and I don't project him to join this club of rising stars that are going to need a max contract like Chet and J-Dub will, and of course Shai. But he's still a mightily impactful player, which will absolutely make a difference in the playoffs, if not this year, very, very soon, next year and the year after. But he's already a mature player, so I think he'll make an impact this year. But I'm just saying, that is a player who you got on a cost-controlled first-round pick who's going to make a postseason impact this year. And it's going to be hard to duplicate that formula, but it's also impossible, besides drafting them, almost, to get players like Chet and J-Dub and Shai in Oklahoma City. Like free agency is not an option for you in this case. So again, the Thunder cannot do anything more to position themselves to keep all three guys. And that's why I think that sometimes the idea of just overwhelming teams with picks to go get a player who you think might tie in the roster and might tie together this core is going to be met with a little bit of pushback in the sense of part of the way that you can use picks is not just going out and trading for a superstar that's getting paid a massive contract. And that will be the temptation this year, especially, the national media will be pushing it. Some fans will be pushing it of you're not paying these guys yet, so you should go trade for a massive contract because you have all these assets. Well, these assets down the road are going to help supplement when you start to pay your own guys. So it's kind of the chicken or the egg argument with, what do you do? And you're in this complex position of you want to use your assets wisely and you want to take advantage of this in the here and now, but you also need to have someone reserved for when you need to fill out the back end of your roster using picks and being a more cost-efficient team. You look at Denver and what they're able to do with Christian Brown and them in their drafts. That's going to be sort of a model to follow as well. So again, I would say relax first and foremost because it's not at that point and won't be at that point for a little bit. Of course, the windows are never open as you think that they are, but for a little bit, let's just enjoy the ride. But it is interesting, and I do think that the Thunder are. It's not as dire, I don't think, as people want to make it out to be. Partly because a large chunk of this is unknown. Like again, who would have guessed that Kevin Durant thought it was best for him to go to Golden State? Like that was something that you can't predict sitting in this position at the time. So things can change for a variety of reasons. Mr. Tweet says, "What is your opinion on Chet gaining 20 to 25 pounds over the next 3 years? Seems to be controversial because people think it'll hurt his jumper." Yeah, I'm not. Again, I'm not gonna comment on anyone else's situation there, but I think that it's an issue that's vastly overblown. Sure, there are matchups that hinder Chet because of his lack of strength or size or whatever. Those matchups are becoming fewer and far between in the modern NBA. And those same matchups, like you look at Jokic, you look at Embiid, you look at these guys like that. Those matchups, Giannis, like those matchups are that way against everyone. Like short of becoming a Giannis type body, which I don't think that Chet has the capability of, and few in the world do, you're not going to be able to match up with Giannis and play Jokic and play these guys like that. And in turn, while not being able to stop those guys, right? I don't think that there's a world where he can put on enough muscle and everything to stop those guys. So while not being able to stop those guys, you're also losing what makes you special and what makes you a tough matchup to guard. So I think that the adding of muscle is a bit overblown. Not only is there stuff that suggests that like when you add muscle, it hurts your jump shot. I will say that J-Dub has bucked that narrative because people were scared about J-Dub adding all this muscle. And I believe they started out from three. I think it was a low percentage from three. I think it was somewhere in the 30s to start the year, like the very, 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 very start of the year. And people were panicking. And now look at him. He's one of the most efficient players in the world. So that old wise tale, I don't really know how true that's going to end up being in the long run if you went out and really tracked it. But for Chet specifically, I don't believe that he needs to add in a ton of muscle because no matter what you add, you're not going to match up with those guys, frankly, because few in the world do. But you would risk losing a lot of what makes you special. And then also as a 7-footer, that's naturally about stress on the body, just being that big. Like we've seen 7-footers all the time, big, small, and indifferent, deal with injuries. When you add on, muscle and not used to playing at that weight, it can also naturally hurt you that way too. So I would not worry so much about Chet's frame. Coming up, let's talk about more of your mailbag questions, including what the Thunder should do in the offseason and what it would take for me to have a mullet. We'll talk about that all coming up. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at BetterHelp. Check out BetterHelp today because we all could benefit from therapy. I really do believe that therapy is a great tool. And so if you feel like you need the opportunity to get something off your chest, big or small, certain things can really start to fester with you and you need to let it out. Especially beneficial to let it out with someone unbiased in your life who's going to help you through and work some through things. So today, you can go to BetterHelp and check out this great option for you, because one thing that's held me back from therapy, and I think holds a lot of people back from therapy, is the fact of you just come up with these ideas of like, oh, well, I'm too busy. Like I got this commitment, that commitment. I can't just go to a therapist. I don't even know where to get a therapist, face to face. BetterHelp takes all that away because it's entirely online. It's entirely suited around your schedule. It's entirely flexible. And what you do is you fill out this questionnaire, and then they're going to match you with a licensed therapist. And if you happen to not enjoy that initial match, you can just re-roll and get a new match free of charge until you find the one that you click with at BetterHelp. So check them out today. BetterHelp is great. Therapy can be different for everybody. Most people have bigger problems than what they often express. So get it off your chest at therapy with their licensed therapist at BetterHelp. Check it out today. BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedInNBA. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedInNBA. When you do, you get 10% off your first month by going to BetterHelp.com/LockedInNBA for 10% off of your first month. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast and the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Don't forget that Locked On has launched their first ever national sports 24/7 channel. There's just a streaming channel on YouTube and also available on Amazon Fire TV with the free Fire TV channel app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories in sports with our local experts and our Locked On national shows covering every league. So find Locked On Sports Today right now, wherever you get your free streaming from YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channel app. Let's continue on with your mailbag questions. Drake says, Rylan, what's your favorite book? Obviously, it's very tough to recall like favorite book of all time because I've read a lot of books in my life, contrary to popular belief, being from Lawton. I would just give you a list of what I've read recently that I really enjoyed. How Shakespeare Became Shakespeare was a really good book. It's actually over there. Loose Balls, which is about the history of the ABA. That's a really good book. When the Game Was War. It was a really good book about the 1984 season. And then I also read a book called Wild Bill. It's the true story of America's frontier's first gunfighter. Had a lot of great stories in it about stuff like the OK Corral and things like that. That was a lot of an interesting journey, so to say. But thanks for asking about my reading habits. Let me know what your favorite book is down in the comments on YouTube and on Twitter. Should OKC trade for Kevon Looney? From Lauren on YouTube. I think that OKC could benefit from him, and he could benefit from Oklahoma City. I think that the Thunder benefit from getting a change of pace big man who you can use in settings like Milwaukee, and in turn, Oklahoma City. We talk about these old players and old in this context, not necessarily meaning their raw age or what's on their birth certificate, but Kevon Looney clearly at 28 is an old 28. He's an old 28. He's laboring and he's had a lot of wear and tear and tread on the tires and things like that. So him not being the Thunder's design fit to play bulk minutes and to play a ton every single night would actually help him stay fresh for the playoffs, where you're going to naturally probably need a player like Kevon Looney more, and he brings that championship pedigree and understands, and he's been through those wars and he's been through those scenarios. Ultimately, I don't think that it'd happen, but it is interesting, and I think that you can make sense of Kevon Looney for OKC. X says, if the Thunder make the Western Conference Finals, will you be rocking a mullet for that series? It'd be incredibly beautiful. I don't know what this word actually is. Immediately beautiful. I don't know if I said that right, but no. NBA Finals, I'll do it if they get to the finals this year. I'm just very nervous about rocking a mullet. I don't think that I can look good in a mullet. I don't think I can look good in anything, frankly, but especially not a mullet. RK says, I see a lot of the similarities in Billy Donovan and Mark's style. Billy caught a lot of grief from fans regarding rotation experimentation, but the playoff results were undeniable. What's your take? I mean, you can clearly see that they share a lot of the similar philosophies, being that Mark worked under Billy for so long and so closely. I think that Mark is a better coach than Billy Donovan, frankly. I think that Mark got the best parts of Billy. I think that he's a better X's and O's coach. I think that Mark has a better ability to make players and adults buy into him, because Billy was so great in college. That's a little unfair to Billy Donovan, I will say, up on the front end, because Billy Donovan never had the luxury of this Thunder team, where you are the voice in the room and you have these years to cultivate that relationship, and nobody truly has an overwhelming ego. And that's not to bash Russell Westbrook or Kevin Durant. But I think that, those guys have been around the block a time or two, obviously. Those guys knew what worked for them. They knew what their routines would be. They knew how they like to play. They knew how they were going to be put in good situations to win games. So they had an idea about them of what worked. Whereas this Thunder team, Mark's gotten to build from the ground up. So that in and of itself creates easier buy-in. But I do think that he also just has a natural knack for it, of getting players and people to buy into what he's selling. So I think that gives him an edge too. But I think that Mark's a really good tactician, which not to slight Billy, but I think that Mark drew the best parts of Billy Donovan. We'll see what happens come playoff time, which is where a lot of people choose to evaluate coaches, obviously. Last question from MK. Is this the best version of the Thunder in their history? Through barking in the post-game interviews, the team being calm and collected and not making excuses, this year has been really fun. This year certainly has been incredibly fun. I think if you took away the nostalgia, this team has the best chance to win an NBA Finals in the sense of this core, not like this team this year, but this core just fits together better, complements each other better. The first generation core was insanely talented. They were phenomenal, and you have that nostalgia tied to them. This core, I think, will be easier to build around and easier to fit together, which gives them a leg up in that category. But I think that this has been the most fun Thunder season of all time. I think that there's no real denying it, but there is you can make debates. Of course, this is so subjective, and you're going to remember fondly those seasons if you're of a certain age. Those Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook seasons, especially early on, that were crazy fun as well. So, bottom line is to spin this question in a different way. The Thunder fan base and the people of Oklahoma City, especially, in the state of Oklahoma, who some largely got introduced to basketball through the Thunder, and like before that weren't watching basketball, have been incredibly blessed with like the best of the best. And we spent the entire rebuild saying it's not going to be Russell and Kevin ever again. But here you sit with a proven MVP caliber player and two guys who share a similar trajectory with a fantastic coach. I think that you have the best coach in Thunder history. I think that you have Shai and Chet and J-Dub, who are a great core. I think you have the best GM in the sport. I think that you have, the new arena momentum will help too, I believe. So all that stuff plays into it. And I think that this team has been a lot of fun and it's exciting. I cannot wait to see how the first, playoff run ends this year, whenever it does. And we'll be here to cover it all the way here on Locked On Thunder. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from, on YouTube and any other podcasting catcher like Spotify, Apple. Leave a review, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe, and follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Stiles. Check out InsideTheThunder.com for written work over there. Until tonight, as we recap the Pelicans Thunder game, be good and be good to one another.